the example of poison ivy. You know, the modern age with all its podcasts, I suspect you probably heard this already, even though I've never been here, but anyway, I'll go for it. So you have poison ivy, you have poison oak here, I think. We have poison ivy in Ontario. And so I brush my skin along the poison ivy. The liquid from the plant goes in my hand, and it itches. So what do? Scratch. So I scratch. Ooh, it feels great, doesn't it? And then I look at my hand. Uh-oh. I've got 3 times as much disease on my skin now than I had before I scratched it. So I begin to realize at some point that freedom from disease is going to come about if I forego the scratching. So I have to forego the fulfillment of the scratching. I have to forego the pleasure of short-term satisfaction for long-term end of disease. And that's the predicament we're in. Right? That's the predicament we're in. So I kind of realize that, and then it itches, I scratch some more. Then I make a determination, I'm not going to scratch. I'm in the shower, I scratch some more. Not easy. And I've been through this one. But at some point, I realized, Viradhammo, you know, you're going to be a piece of raw meat if you keep doing this. You've just got to stop scratching. And there's a kind of steely determination, isn't there? To, no, oh, come on, a little bit. No. No. And so this is where the patience and renunciation comes about. And it does not come about through some sense of guilt, like, oh, I shouldn't enjoy myself. No, it becomes about because one's search now is for the unconditioned. One's interest is in the deathless, or the unconditioned, the unformed, these kind of words we use. And that's a very logical conclusion you come to. You know, your intellect sees that. No, it can't be outside. It can't be a sight. It can't be a sound. It can't be an emotion. It can't be a social situation. So your tendency to move to those falls away. And you begin to abide as witness to the desire to have comfort over discomfort. And you begin to feel the mosquito bite. And you begin to realize, oh, discomfort feels this way, it arises and ceases, but that which knows is beyond desire, is not desire. And that's where the peace of the mind lies. And it's very subtle. Very subtle. We don't notice the peace of just being witness to the way things are, because it's kind of grey. Like when I ask you, just listen to sound. It's a ho-hum, isn't it? Not much. But sustain that for 24 hours. See what happens. That takes you to emptiness. Because the more you can abide in this sense of full conscious presence. Notice when how am I doing here? Talking too much. Notice how when I ask you, listen to sound. I'm not asking you to listen to a particular sound, or even better, I say, let sound become conscious. To me, when I do that, and language is personal, but it's a kind of helpful language for me. When I allow myself to do that, there's less of a doer, less of a listener. There is more listening. I just allow this moment to be the way it is. Being, rather than a doer. Now, if you can sustain that for long periods of time, or even short periods of time, you begin to touch the emptiness of the mind. Empty of a doer. Still, there's content. You know, there's still volume, and there's still perception, and so on, functioning, but there's no longer the sense of a doer. There's being. There's still a sense of presence. There's no longer the sense of an active participant trying to do something, to become something, to get rid of something. And that's non-desire, non-resistance, non-becoming, these kinds of words that we use. And you discover that more and more in these very simple ways of sound is this way. And then you try to apply that to the more complex parts of your life, to the discomforts, to the emotional patterns, to the disappointments of life. Someone disappoints you. They disappointed me. Right? So if they were different, I would be happy. Maybe. Or disappointment feels this way. So in a social sense, let's say I'm involved, let's say I'm a manager of 10 people at work, and on the social side, I have to tell people, no, you can't do that. No, you can't be late. I'm sorry. No, your work isn't up to scratch. Or, yeah, that was very good. So I have a social responsibility. So if I feel disappointed, and it's my responsibility to produce a product, then it's my responsibility to sell someone. You know, I found you very disappointing, actually, your performance, which is fine. We couldn't live life otherwise, right? And that's the social context of our life. So Buddhism isn't a kind of doormat philosophy where people can just run all over you. So we have the social part of our life, but then the inner vigilance is this feeling of disappointment as something that we hold on to. And then disappointment, I get to know disappointment. I get to really know it inside out so that it doesn't seek another object. I just know it's disappointing. Disappointment arises and ceases, and what does it cease into? It ceases into that silent presence, full conscious presence, which is always there. It's not a matter of time. And it's not an object which you have to find outside of yourself. It's a matter of just letting go of objects, or letting go of the search for objects, or letting go of the desire for objects, or letting go of the resistance to objects, and so on and so forth. So, you listen. And there is listening. And the more we apply that very, very simple principle, the more adept we become. This is bhavana. We become better and better at it. I often talk about fear. I've experienced a lot of fear in my life. I know every flavor. Chocolate, vanilla, terror, anxiety attacks, performance anxiety, blah, blah, blah. And yet I'm sitting here, I'm not afraid. Now this isn't a kind of self-testimonial, it's just to maybe encourage you that when I started doing this business of talking Dhamma, I was just so afraid. I'd just have to run to the toilet for this kind of a talk. Great laxity. Maybe 10, really like panic attacks. And I contemplate that a lot now, like self-consciousness. I remember being in Chicago airport, 20, 30 years ago. I was so shy that I grabbed a used newspaper and just hid behind it. While I was waiting for another plane. And now, walk through Chicago airport, no self-consciousness. Now, I didn't do that as an act of will, because if I could do it as an act of will, I would have done it 30 years ago. I had to wear it out. And how did I wear it out? I gave talks and felt the fear. Right? I'd come up, and lips would be shaking. If I had to take the water, my hand would be shaking. I think about it, it was awful. It was just this horrible torture. And yet I knew that if I didn't do that, and I just tried to find my own little shell, my own little cave in wherever, I'd always be running away from that mindset whenever it came up. So it was very, very important. So then Lompo Sumedo, he would say to me, welcome it. I mean, welcome it? Are you kidding me? It's awful. He said, yeah, but he was right. He was right. He said, well, you welcome the pain. Not in a way of self-mortification where you hurt yourself, but you welcome the suffering. You let it come into consciousness. And then what happens, its fuel dies away. Its fuel dies away because one no longer takes it personally. It's karma. This is my karma. This is the way it worked. It came through me. And so you get a kind of two things happening. You get the arising of these kind of karmic forces of extreme discomfort and suffering, and you find a peace within them, within the discomfort. You find a peaceful sense of presence and trust and confidence. But also, their energy dies away. So there's a kind of double profit there. But, vice versa, when they arise and you don't pay attention to them, and you create a self around them, and you distract, then you create the causes for more of that in the future, Plus your mind is very, very confused. So there's a kind of responsibility there, urgency to not run away from these things. They're very, very important to make conscious. And they're not like a fault, like this fear that I felt. It wasn't a fault of mine. I certainly didn't look for it. It wasn't hurting anyone. It's just the way that this mind had been conditioned for whatever reason. So it's just the way it is. And being with the way it is, the problem was not the fear, it was the desire not to have the fear. That was the problem. And that took me a long time to figure out. It's not the fear, man. It's the desire not to have the fear. So then I would do metta practice, I would do asubha practice, I would try to, like, I'd rehearse a talk, or I'd have notes, but I never looked at the fear. And then I saw, well, what is it? What is the problem? And then I'd start to make it conscious, full conscious presence, feel for this way. And it was awful. But then I began to see, what's the resistance to the fear? What does that feel like? And then as I saw that, I said, okay, now I understand. Now I understand. And then the fear could begin to wind its way the way it had to wind its way. And so with all the kind of different sufferings that we experience as human beings, one has to embrace it to understand it, to really know the nature of fear. I have to let it become conscious. Because if I just judge it, react it, distract it, and all the rest of it, I'll never understand it. So, listen to sound. You have to wait. You listen to sound. Sound comes up into consciousness. Feel your knee. You wait. The sensation knee comes up into consciousness. Feel the terror. Same principle, more difficult. Not in ways to hurt yourself, but more difficult. What arises from that kind of emptying out of karma is really the Brahma Viharas. The heart now is free, it's available for compassion, it responds with gladness, it has a sense of peace with the way things are. The heart is available, and it's not manipulated, that's just the natural freedom of the heart when it's not bound by these things. So it's a very liberating path, but it requires a lot of forbearance. A lot of forbearance. Okay, I'll leave that for your reflection. Do a Q&A, or maybe if anyone has any questions, comments. Yes, sir. Yeah, please.
In the talk you told us about equanimity and staying with the feeling, but I'm told Nibbana is even beyond the Brahma Viharas. So could you please explain what is it that the ultimate practice is towards?
What are you feeling right now?
Nervousness.
Stay with that. You create a question, you create a problem, you want me to answer your problem, then you have another doubt. You think that the solution is having answers. I suggest that the solution is not asking questions. Otherwise you'll always be stuck in intellect. You'll read the texts, you'll have a question, it'll be clever, you'll ask the bhikkhus, and the bhikkhus will give you an answer, and then you'll have another question. This is not the end of doubt. The end of doubt is in silence, not through intellect. So, what are you feeling now? And stay with that. Got it? So, any others? I hope it didn't frighten you. be more kind.
I'm amazed that you brought up a subject that actually this past weekend I did something that I was very scared about and had a lot of anticipatory terrors and scare. And it occurred to me for the first time in my life, the problem was I don't like the unpleasant feeling of the fear, exactly what you just said.
Right.
And then, so my thing I would like to take further with you is, I feel like the mistake I made in that moment was I discovered that, and I expected it, okay, now I know it, so go away now.
Yes, yeah. Well, you know, keep what I find is if I work in areas which are not complex or let's say not complex, like sound, bodily feeling, and I just keep coming back to that principle of balance, right? And I get to know that inside out, very simple. Then when something more complex comes up, I'll be able to sustain that full conscious presence. Because what happens is you get the insight, but then your old conditioning comes up and then starts to make judgments or all the rest of it. So what you kind of, one doesn't have the sustained, it's like, let's say if you're riding a bicycle, right? You're learning how to ride a bicycle, you get the balance every now and then and you fall off. So what you're doing is you're learning how to keep the balance through complexity. And you do that through simplicity. So that's why it's very important to go for a walk in the woods and be centered. Very important to get your head out of the computer, right? And get into a space where you are present and centered. And train in that. The rest, it'll take care of itself. And when the complex things come up, you'll see, you'll get, the insight will help you, and then you'll see you're trying to react to that, but you'll stay with it, and you'll see the necessity of patience and forbearance and all those different things. Not as an idealized attitude, but as just a very practical craft. So it is, I like to compare it a lot to craft skills, that the craft of the heart is both an understanding thing, but it's also like a tactile thing. Like if you've ever done weaving or pottery or anything, you start out with a craft and you just feel really fumbling. And then your fingers start to understand how to weave. They understand the threads and they understand the tension and all the rest of it. Same with your heart. Through just having the courage and having the interest in looking at the complete experience of your life in these inner ways, you begin to have an intuitive, almost tactile sense of what right practice is. It's very simple in words. It's very simple. But the complexity of our conditioning is not simple. And so we fumble and we don't understand and we make different, but you keep at it and you get these little aso moments and they add up to a kind of stability of mind. So yeah, keep with that insight, but don't try to manufacture it. And that's what happens with insight is it's genuine, and then we try to manufacture it. We try to get it back again, and then we're caught in desire again. So always just be very happy with the ordinary. Just ho-hum, gray, fine, okay. You can do that, then the rest opens up. Okay. Yes, sir. Please, yes.
You said...
Oh, Edward. Yes, Edward, right.
You said moving away from the moment is not the goal.
Right.
And at that moment I could feel within myself the tremendous force that arises so often, over and over again, to do just that.
Right.
To move away from
right.
it.
Very true, yeah. We're that's what birth is. Birth is becoming and resisting. So to know that force, takes it takes a conviction that cannot be the way. We were talking about conviction and so on earlier. It takes a kind of insight. Well, that couldn't be it. So there's no longer the belief in it. Because there's no longer belief in it, it becomes more like this raw energy, which then you begin to witness. Ah, yeah, okay, I know you, Mara, kind of thing. But if you don't have that conviction, then the sirens are calling you out and think, come here, come here. And you're in the soup again. Yeah, so not to, like birth is a powerful business. It's a there's powerful energies come out that we're dealing with. And so it needs it, it's at least a one lifetime practice, right? You just got to really keep at it. But then, if you have that insight, what else is there to do? What else? What other possibility is there, really? Yes, sir.
So while I was trying to formulate this question, it got way too big. So, so the basis of it is, are ideas just merely distractions from experience and realizing Nibbana? As we form ideas, aren't they just merely distracting us from the moment and experience?
It depends. Depends how we use ideas. So, if I try to think my way through to the unconditioned, it doesn't make sense because thoughts are conditioned. But if I use a thought to match my insights, so I use an idea, say, make sound fully conscious. That's the kind of language I find helpful because I've explored language to understand. That's an idea, but it's grounded in an insight. So what you're given from the teachings are ideas, and you want to ground them in insight. So you take something like the First Noble Truth, there is suffering. Suffering has to be understood, right? That's an idea. Now if you just keep it at that idea level, and then go to the next idea, then you just become an encyclopedia of Buddhist ideas. And you can do it, but go Google, it's easier. But if you take that idea and say, well, what was he talking about? Why did he frame this teaching in this particular way? What was he pointing to? Then you're developing that contemplative side of yourself, that inquisitive side. So suffering has to be understood. And then you try to figure it out intellectually. So you analyze and you go, wait, I'm just in thought again. And then you get that insight, just let it come up into consciousness, okay. It's like bird watching. If you're a bird, or let's just get a bird feeder, say, right? Like cat, we do snow where I am. We do cold. So when spring comes and you get your bird feeder, just gaga, these birds are back. The birds are back. So what happens? What happens if I just watch the bird feeder? I watch, and just by watching the bird feeder, I see the relative size of a grosbeak and a sparrow. I see the relative size of two birds, and that can become an idea, but that's an insight into bird behavior and bird definition and so on, right? And then that insight teaches me something about the world of birds. And where that came from? That came from observation, just observing. And though this is you take the teaching, and now how can you make it real in your own mind? You have to bring it up and kind of keep it in your mind. So suffering. What's suffering feel like? Or craving. So you take some of these ideas and you begin to let them be where your attention, how your attention focuses. You take one word and you make it really significant. Then the Buddha's ideas become your insights. And you can talk about it. Right? But if you just leave it as ideas, really, and that's where doubt comes in. You just get one question after another, and you get an answer and a doubt, answer and doubt. So intellect is very, very limited. But intellect can be useful. It can be very, very useful. So one of the challenges you have in noticing, freeing the mind in terms of intellect, is to allow yourself not to know. So, like if I have a lot of investment in intellectual pursuits and intellectual identity maybe, then Like I had when I'm sure all of us who teach have had this kind of experience where you're in an audience like this, and maybe I was a young monk, and someone asked me a really clever question in Pali. I don't know Pali. I'm just a monk. Well, yeah, but you've been a monk. You should know Pali. And I feel intimidated. Right? So he asked me some really, really clever analytical question. What is it? Da, 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 da. And it beats me. Right? And then rather than actually just know this is what lack of confidence feels like, or this is what doubt feels like, I think I have to give him an answer. So I BS him a bit, right? Snore him a bit, and I escaped that one. And then he's there the next talk. Right? God. So then he's in the corner. I don't look at him for questions. You ever done this? I've done this. But eventually I think, I don't know. And that was nice. And and then it's in your own practice, you have a doubt comes up. Rather than just think about it, just get to know doubt, because doubt is uncomfortable. So what does not knowing feel like? Uncomfortable. Oh, I don't know, am I doing it right? Metta, anapanasati, what should I do? Da, 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 da. And you just know the feeling of not knowing. It's uncomfortable, but your mind, you don't go to the thoughts, you let it run, it ceases. And your mind is free of intellect. But it still uses intellect, right? It's found a way to use intellect rather than intellect running your show all the time. And very important, I think, in the spiritual life, because thought is conditioned, it's limited. Thought can be brilliant, can direct, and so on. There's nothing wrong with it. But I think that's a very important part of how do you use thought, right thought, and so on. So observe how like, a lot of ideation, does it lead to peace? Are the things you read, does it lead to more confusion? Or does it lead to more contemplative? What kind of things bring you more doubt when you read? What kind of things bring you back to the moment? And then find confidence in those kinds of readings and intellectual instructions. Yeah? Okay. Ruby?
How important is it that we name an experience? I'm thinking, like, for example, we feel betrayed.
Mm-hmm.
But maybe we don't know that that's betrayal. It's just that there's this experience happening. It's difficult to sit with. When we sit with it, is it important that we know for ourselves, okay, this is what betrayal feels like?
I think it's culturally important, but I don't think it's dharmically important. I think culturally we're very conditioned to always analyze. I think it's one of the impediments of maybe Western intellectual culture, and that it almost feels like cheating just to leave it alone, right? I should analyze this, like a loose tooth, I should kind of keep going at it. But actually, it just feels rotten, it's fine. It's just this terrible feeling, good enough. And then to look at the desire to figure it out, because the desire to figure it out is the desire to get rid of it, oftentimes. Yeah? I find that for myself. So it's a kind of strong cultural bias, I think, that many of us have from that. Not to say that definitions are not helpful, sometimes they are helpful, but I think one should look at that tendency to always go, what is it? What is it? And that's doubt. That's all it is, it's doubt. So then you compound the problem. You have the emotion and you have the kind of need to define it. And again, you like I was saying to this gentleman, apologies for being a bit tough on you, but it's the same thing. We create a question, right? And then we think the problem is having the answer. But actually we created the problem. Yeah? The science does this. For one question they get, for one question they get another 20 or whatever, which is fine in science. But in terms of spiritual life, we're looking for the unconditioned, right? The uncreated. So that whole thing of needing to analyze, I think that's a very important thing to recognize as a kind of movement of restlessness. Yeah? That's the way I kind of work with it. All right, shall we cash in our chips? We'll finish with something. When you finish with the chant, do you finish with Metta Sutta?
We could, that would be nice.
Metta Sutta, page 28. This is what should be done. 32? Or 28? Okay. Different books. This is what should be done is the first line. This is what should be done by one who is skilled in goodness and who knows the path of peace. Let them be able and upright, straightforward and gentle in speech, humble and not conceited, contented and easily satisfied, unburdened with duties, and frugal in their ways, peaceful and calm and wise and skillful, not proud and demanding in nature. Let them not do the slightest thing that the wise would later reprove, wishing in gladness and in safety. May all beings be at ease, whatever living beings there may be, whether they are weak or strong, omitting none, the great or the mighty, medium, short or small, the seen and the unseen, those living near and far away, those born and to be born. May all beings be at ease. Let none deceive another or despise any being in any state. Let none through anger or ill will wish harm upon another, even as a mother protects with her life her child, her only child. So with a boundless heart should one cherish all living beings, radiating kindness over the entire world, spreading upwards to the skies and downwards to the depths, outwards and unbounded, free from hatred and ill will, whether standing or walking, seated or lying down, free from drowsiness. One should sustain this recollection. This is said to be the sublime abiding, by not holding to fixed views, the pure-hearted one, having clarity of vision, being free from all sense desires, is not born